let's take a look at basic time and materials project. We'll look at the setup and then we'll look at the example. So let's review the setup that we just walked through. So back to our system, we'll look at the project group for a basic time and materials. We've got one already pre-baked here in the oven. So we'll pick time and materials without work in process. So you can see we've set the project type as time and materials. We're going to post our hour costs, expense costs, and item costs to the profit and loss statement. If we did any sort of on-account invoicing, which is a fancy way of saying prepayments or advances, we would post those to a balance sheet account. We'll leave the accrual flags off. As we mentioned before, these would cause the accrual of revenue on the posting of the transaction versus on the invoicing of the transaction. We'll take a look at this in the advanced project accounting module. So now that we've set up the project group, we also need to define our account mappings. So we'll go to the ledger posting setup. And here, remember, we've picked P&L for our costs. So we only need to worry about the cost radio button and the cost item radio button of defining what accounts we post to on the P&L. And here we define for the cost item transaction type that for all postings, they would go to this cost of project product item account. And then on the revenue side, since we're doing a simple T&M project, we only have to worry about invoiced revenue. And if we were doing accrued revenue, we'd need to define accrued revenue accounts here. But since we're doing a simple one, we just want, when we invoice the project, we just want accrued revenue to go to these accounts, or invoiced revenue to go to these accounts. So that's the basic bare bones setup of what you need to do to get a project, a time and materials project to work. So let's take a look at an example then of how this works once I create the group and run through a flow. So we'll use this simple flow. We'll create a project, we'll post some transactions to it, invoice the project, and we'll use the project statement to review the effects of the posting on the financials. So we'll hop back into the system, go to projects, let's create a project. We'll create a time and materials project type, give it a name. We'll use our simple T&M project group that we just looked at. Let's create a fresh new contract using the Alpine Ski House. All right, and we'll create the project. So now we have our project created. We'll set the project to in process. And now let's post a transaction and see what happens based on our journalizing settings and our account mappings. So we'll use an hour journal to speed things along. Hour journals are another method. The project journal itself is another method of posting transactions against a project. In other modules, you've seen timesheets and you've seen expense reports. This is another way to, if you have the appropriate authorizations, which most likely project accountants would have, they can post these journals into the project without having to go through a timesheet or an expense report and the associated workflow. So we'll take a look at the setup a little bit later in this module. So let's create a new hour journal. And here it's similar to a timesheet. So we need to give it a date. And then we need to pick a category. We'll use PM. Pick a worker. I like Yoichiro. And then we'll give it, Yoichiro worked 40 hours. And we'll post the transaction. Our journal's been posted. We'll close out of this. So now let's take a look at what the results of this posting transaction happen. We'll use the project statement under control. Project statement is a quick way to look at the overall financial results of your project. So from here we'll include all transaction types. We'll run it and we can see that as I posted this journal, I've recognized $8,000 worth of costs. And if I wanted to look at the posted transaction itself, I could go here and view the voucher. and you can see that I posted to a project cost account. This was driven off my ledger posting setup and my project group. I told my project group I want to journalize costs to the profit and loss statement, and then with my ledger posting setup I said costs go to this GL account. So you may have noticed though in the project statement there was no revenue. So in order to recognize revenue on a simple T&M project, since we did not set up any sort of accruals, that happens on invoicing. So we'll do a quick invoice proposal. We'll invoice this thing on the last day of May, create the proposal, post it. Now let's run the project statement and review the results. Now you can see that we've actually recognized $14,000 worth of revenue. And if we were to go back and look at our project transactions, now you can see that we're fully invoiced on this project transaction. If we look at the voucher, you can see here's our cost posting, and now we can see our revenue posting, which happened on our invoicing date.